I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, watching my daughter give her maid of honor speech. 200 guests laughed as Jessica told charming stories about her life. But when she got to the part about her childhood, she said something that made my blood run cold. "I practically raised myself," she said with a practiced laugh. "No silver spoon for me. I worked for everything I have." She didn't even glance my way. Didn't mention the woman who paid for every bit of this wedding. The woman who worked 2 jobs for 20 years so she could have everything she wanted. The woman standing alone in a corner, wearing a dress she'd saved 6 months to buy. My own daughter. And then a man I hadn't seen in 40 years stepped up to the microphone. And what he said next changed everything. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and stay with me to hear how this ends. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. You might see your own family in this story. My name is Helen Bradford, and I'm 68 years old. I taught elementary school for 35 years in a small public school in Ohio. I wasn't rich. I wasn't glamorous. But I was a good mother. At least, I thought I was. My husband Richard died 8 years ago from a sudden heart attack. We'd been married for 32 years. He was a mechanic and I was a teacher. We lived simply, saved carefully, and loved our daughter Jessica more than anything in this world. She was our only child, born after years of trying, and from the moment I held her in my arms, I knew I would do anything for her. Richard and I both worked hard to give Jessica opportunities we never had. I took on tutoring jobs in the evenings. Richard worked overtime at the shop on weekends. We wanted her to go to a good college, to have a life without the financial struggles we'd faced. When she got accepted to an expensive private university, we were so proud. We took out loans. I sold my mother's antique jewelry. Richard worked double shifts until his body ached. But we made it work. Jessica thrived at that university. She joined the right clubs, made the right friends, got internships at impressive companies. After graduation, she landed a job in corporate marketing in New York City. She moved into a beautiful apartment that I helped furnish. She bought designer clothes that I helped pay for when she was starting out. I was so proud of the confident, successful woman she'd become. After Richard died, Jessica and I grew closer, or so I thought. She'd call me every Sunday. She'd tell me about her exciting life in the city, her promotions, the important people she was meeting. I lived for those calls. I was alone in our little house in Ohio, retired on a modest pension, but hearing her voice made everything worthwhile. 2 years ago, she called with the most exciting news. She'd met someone. His name was Thomas Montgomery, and he worked in finance. "He's wonderful, Mom," she'd said, her voice bubbling with happiness. "I think he might be the one." I cried happy tears that night. My daughter had found love. When she brought Thomas home to meet me 6 months later, I could see why she'd fallen for him. He was handsome, polite, well-educated. He came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. His father was a retired judge. His mother was on the boards of several charities. During that visit, I made my famous pot roast in our small kitchen. Thomas seemed to enjoy it, asking me questions about my teaching career, about Richard. Jessica seemed nervous the whole time, watching him carefully, as if worried about what he might think of our modest home. After they left, I felt a strange unease I couldn't quite name. But I pushed it aside. My daughter was happy. That's all that mattered. 6 months after that visit, Jessica called to tell me they were engaged. I screamed with joy. I immediately started thinking about the wedding, imagining myself helping her choose a dress, addressing invitations together, all those mother-daughter moments I'd dreamed about. But those moments never quite materialized the way I'd imagined. When Jessica started planning the wedding, she was consumed by it. She hired an expensive wedding planner in New York. She chose a venue I'd never heard of, some historic mansion in Connecticut that charged $40,000 just for the space. Every time she called, she talked about vendors and photographers and florists whose prices made my head spin. "Mom, don't worry about the cost," she'd say when I gently questioned the expenses. "Thomas's parents are helping." But then, 3 months before the wedding, Jessica called me crying. Thomas's father had lost a significant amount in a bad investment. The Montgomerys couldn't contribute as much as they'd promised. Jessica was panicking. She'd already put deposits down on everything. The wedding she'd planned was going to cost over $90,000, and suddenly, most of that money had to come from somewhere else. "I don't know what to do, Mom," she sobbed into the phone. "We might have to cancel everything. I'll be so humiliated, I didn't think twice." "Sweetheart, I'll help," I heard myself say. "Mom, you can't afford this," Jessica said, but I could hear the hope in her voice. "I have savings," I told her. "And the house. Your father and I paid off the mortgage years ago." I'll never forget the silence on the other end of the line. Then quietly, Jessica said, "You'd do that for me?" "Of course I would. You're my daughter. This is your special day. That's when everything changed for me." Though I didn't realize it at the time. Over the next 2 months, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I sold the house Richard and I had lived in for 30 years. The house where we'd brought Jessica home from the hospital. The house where Richard had built a swing set in the backyard. The house filled with every memory of our life together. I sold it and moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. The house sold for $320,000. After paying off the small remainder of what we owed and covering the moving costs, I had about $300,000 left. I put most of it in a retirement account, knowing I needed to be smart. But I took out $70,000. I sent it to Jessica in 3 installments for the wedding expenses. The venue, the catering, the photographer, the flowers, the band, her dress. I covered it all. Jessica was effusive with gratitude at first. "Mom, I can't believe you did this for me." "You're amazing. This wedding is going to be perfect, and it's all because of you." I didn't need thanks. I just wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to have the wedding of her dreams. Isn't that what mothers do? But as the wedding approached, something shifted. Jessica's phone calls became less frequent. When we did talk, she seemed distracted, rushed. She stopped asking my opinion about wedding decisions. When I suggested a few of Richard's favorite songs for the reception, she dismissed them as too old-fashioned. When I asked if I could help with any DIY projects to save money, she laughed and said, "Mom, this isn't that kind of wedding." I told myself she was just stressed. Planning a wedding is overwhelming. She didn't mean to be short with me. Then came the conversation about my dress. I'd found a beautiful dusty rose dress at a department store. It cost $300, which was more than I'd usually spend, but I wanted to look nice for my daughter's wedding. I sent Jessica a photo. She called me back an hour later. "Mom, that dress is fine, I guess. But maybe look for something a little more, I don't know, upscale? Some of Thomas's family will be there, and they're pretty fashion conscious." I felt a small sting, but brushed it off. I went to a boutique and found an elegant mother-of-the-bride dress for $600. It was the most I'd ever spent on a single piece of clothing. I sent Jessica a photo of that one too. "Much better," she texted back. That was it. No, "You'll look beautiful, Mom," or "I can't wait to see you in it." Just much better. I should have seen the signs. I should have known. But I was so focused on making sure everything was perfect for her that I didn't see what was happening. The week before the wedding, I drove to Connecticut and checked into a modest hotel near the venue. Jessica had suggested I stay there instead of with her in the apartment she and Thomas shared. "We're so busy with last-minute things, Mom. You'll be more comfortable at the hotel." I understood. Or I tried to. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding. It was held at an exclusive country club. I wore a nice navy dress and arrived right on time. When I walked into the private dining room, I saw Thomas's family and friends. Jessica's college friends. People in expensive suits and designer dresses. I felt immediately out of place, but I put on a smile and tried to mingle. Jessica barely acknowledged me when I arrived. She was across the room, laughing with Thomas's mother and some other women. When I walked over to say hello, she gave me a quick hug and said, "Oh, Mom, there you are. This is my mom, Helen," she said to the group, then immediately turned back to her conversation. I stood there awkwardly for a moment before retreating to find my assigned seat. During dinner, I sat between one of Thomas's uncles and a family friend I'd never met. They were polite but clearly more interested in talking to each other than including me. I tried to join the conversation a few times, but my comments fell flat. I felt invisible. Then came the toasts. Thomas's father stood and gave a warm, funny speech about Thomas growing up. Thomas's mother spoke beautifully about gaining a daughter. Jessica's maid of honor, her college roommate Madison, talked about their adventures in New York City. No one asked me to speak. I sat there watching everyone toast my daughter, and no one even mentioned my name. After dinner, I approached Jessica. "Sweetheart, that was lovely. I'm so happy for you." She hugged me quickly. "Thanks, Mom. Listen, tomorrow's going to be crazy. The wedding planner will tell you where to go and when. Just follow her lead, okay?" It felt like instructions, not a conversation. But I nodded and smiled. That night, alone in my hotel room, I cried. I couldn't explain exactly why. Jessica was just stressed. The wedding would be beautiful tomorrow. I'd see her walk down the aisle. That's what mattered. I told myself I was being overly sensitive. If I'd only known what was coming, I would have left right then. I would have driven back to Ohio and saved myself the humiliation. But I didn't know, so I stayed. The wedding day arrived. It was a beautiful September afternoon. The venue was even more stunning than the photos. The gardens were perfectly manicured. White chairs were set up for 200 guests. An elegant archway decorated with thousands of white roses stood at the altar. I arrived early, wearing my dusty rose dress, my hair done at the hotel salon, trying to look worthy of being the mother of the bride. The wedding planner, a brisk woman with a clipboard, directed me to a side room where Jessica was getting ready with her bridesmaids. When I walked in, the room went quiet for just a moment. Then Jessica said, "Oh, Mom, you look nice." Nice, not beautiful. Not, "I'm so glad you're here." Just nice. I tried to help, asked if she needed anything. "The stylist has everything under control, Mom. You should probably go find your seat." I was being dismissed. By my own daughter. On her wedding day. I walked out to the ceremony area and found my seat. Front row, left side. The mother of the bride's seat. But I sat there alone while across the aisle, Thomas's parents were surrounded by family members, everyone laughing and taking photos together. My best friend Maggie had made the drive from Ohio to be there for me. She found me sitting alone and squeezed my hand. "You okay, honey?" she whispered. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The ceremony was beautiful. Jessica looked absolutely stunning in her white gown. When she walked down the aisle, I cried. My baby girl, all grown up, getting married. Thomas gazed at her like she was the only person in the world. They said their vows. They kissed. Everyone applauded. I thought the worst of my hurt feelings was over. I thought once the ceremony was done, I could just enjoy the reception and celebrate my daughter's happiness. I had no idea what was waiting for me. The cocktail hour after the ceremony was held in the mansion's garden. I stood near the appetizer table with Maggie, trying to make small talk with other guests. Every time I saw Jessica, she was surrounded by people. I didn't want to interrupt. I figured I'd get a chance to talk to her at the reception. When we moved into the ballroom for dinner, I found my assigned seat. I wasn't at the head table with the wedding party. I understood that. But I also wasn't seated with any family. I was at a table with some of Thomas's distant relatives who didn't know me. Maggie was seated at a different table across the room. I felt like just another guest, not the mother of the bride. Dinner was served. It was delicious. A fancy meal with courses I couldn't even pronounce. I tried to enjoy it, tried to make conversation with the people at my table, but my heart was heavy. Then came the toasts. Thomas's best man went first, telling funny stories about college. Jessica's maid of honor, Madison, went next. Her speech was polished and entertaining. She talked about how Jessica was a self-made woman who'd come to New York with nothing but ambition and built an amazing life for herself. "She's proof that hard work pays off," Madison said, raising her glass. I sat there, listening to her describe my daughter as someone who'd done it all alone and felt anger rising in my chest. But I swallowed it down. This wasn't the time or place. Then Jessica stood up to give her own speech. She thanked everyone for coming. She thanked the wedding planner, the vendors, Thomas's parents for their support and guidance. She talked about how grateful she was to have found Thomas, how lucky she felt. And then she said it. "I know a lot of people here grew up with advantages I didn't have. I practically raised myself. My parents worked, but they were just getting by. There was no college fund waiting for me. No trust fund. No safety net. I worked my way through school. I worked my way up the corporate ladder. No silver spoon for me," the room laughed appreciatively. They loved this narrative. The self-made woman who married into their world. But every word was a knife in my heart. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at my daughter. She was standing there in a $15,000 dress that I paid for. At a wedding that cost $90,000 that I paid for. In a room full of people eating food that I paid for. And she was telling them she did it all herself. She was erasing me. Erasing her father. Erasing every sacrifice we made. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people. Maggie, sitting across the room, caught my eye. Her face was filled with horror and anger. She started to stand, as if she was going to say something, but I shook my head slightly. "Please don't, not now." Jessica finished her speech to enthusiastic applause. She sat down, beaming, holding Thomas's hand. She didn't look at me once. I wanted to leave. I wanted to walk out of that ballroom and drive back to Ohio and never speak to her again. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by shock and hurt and disbelief. How did I raise someone who could do this to me? The reception continued. People danced. The band played. I sat at my table, barely able to breathe. A few people came over to say hello, to tell me how beautiful Jessica looked. I smiled and thanked them, playing the part of the proud mother while inside I was dying. Then something unexpected happened. A man approached the band and asked for the microphone. He was tall, distinguished-looking, probably in his late 50s. He wore an expensive suit and had an air of authority about him. I recognized him from earlier. He'd been sitting with Thomas's family. I assumed he was one of Thomas's relatives or business associates. The band stopped playing. The man waited for the room to quiet down. Jessica and Thomas looked up, surprised. No one had scheduled any more speeches. "I apologize for the interruption," the man said into the microphone, his voice calm but commanding. "My name is Robert Kensington. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Financial, where Thomas works. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but something was said during the toasts that I can't let stand." The room went completely silent. I saw Jessica's face go pale. The bride spoke about how she raised herself, how she had no advantages, how she's self-made, Robert continued. "That's a compelling story, but it's not true." My heart started pounding. What was happening? Robert's eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. "I'm looking for Helen Bradford. Is she here?" Every head in the room turned toward me. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Finally, I raised my hand slightly. "Helen, could you please stand?" Robert said gently. On shaking legs, I stood up. Robert smiled at me. Helen, do you remember me? I stared at him, confused. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. I was in your second grade class at Lincoln Elementary School in 1975. You probably don't remember. You had dozens of students every year, but I remember you. My mind raced back 50 years. Lincoln Elementary, 1975. And then it clicked. Bobby Kensington. A small, quiet boy with raggedy clothes and sad eyes. A foster child who'd been bounced from home to home. A child who often came to school hungry. Bobby? I whispered. Yes, ma'am, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. You probably don't remember, but you changed my life. I was a foster kid with nothing. No one cared about me. I was angry, struggling, failing. You saw something in me. You stayed after school to tutor me. You brought me lunch when you saw I didn't have one. You told me I was smart, that I could do anything if I worked hard. You believed in me when no one else did. Tears were streaming down my face now. You gave me books to keep. You encouraged me to apply for scholarships. You wrote me letters of recommendation for prep school. You changed the trajectory of my entire life, Robert said. I went on to get scholarships, went to college, built a career, and I never forgot the teacher who saw potential in a forgotten foster kid. The room was absolutely silent. Everyone was staring at Robert, then at me, then at Jessica. I've been following your life from a distance over the years, Helen. When I heard Thomas Montgomery was marrying Jessica Bradford and that her mother's name was Helen Bradford from Ohio, I wondered if it could possibly be the same woman. When I saw you at the rehearsal dinner last night, I knew it was you. I was planning to introduce myself privately after the wedding. But then I heard Jessica's speech tonight. Robert turned to look at Jessica. His expression was no longer warm. Jessica, I did some research after I realized Helen was your mother. I know your story. I know your real story. Your mother didn't just work while you were growing up. She worked 2 jobs for 20 years to send you to that expensive private university. Your father worked overtime every weekend. They took out loans. They sold possessions. They sacrificed everything so you could have opportunities they never had. Jessica's face was ashen. Thomas was staring at her in shock. Your mother is a retired teacher living on a pension. And yet, when you needed money for this wedding, she sold the house she'd lived in for 30 years. The house filled with memories of her late husband, your father. She gave you $70,000 to pay for this event. And you just stood up in front of 200 people and said you did it all yourself. Gasps rippled through the room. People were whispering. Some were looking at me with sympathy. Others were staring at Jessica with judgment. I'm standing here tonight because of Helen Bradford's kindness and generosity, Robert said firmly. I'm successful because a teacher, who barely made enough money to support her own family, still found a way to help a struggling kid who wasn't even hers. That's who Helen is, and she deserves better than to be erased from her own daughter's life story. He turned back to me. Helen, thank you for everything you did for me, for everything you did for your daughter, even though she doesn't seem to appreciate it. You are a remarkable woman. Robert handed the microphone back to the band and walked directly to my table. He pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. I hope you don't mind if I sit with you for the rest of the evening. I'd love to catch up. I couldn't speak. I was crying too hard. Maggie had rushed over from her table and was hugging me. Other guests were coming over, people I didn't know, offering me napkins and kind words. Across the room, Jessica was still standing at the head table, her face buried in her hands. Thomas was speaking to her urgently, his expression stunned and angry. His mother, Patricia, had gotten up and was walking toward me. I braced myself, not knowing what to expect. Patricia reached my table and knelt down beside my chair. "Helen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Jessica told us you were proud, but refused our help with the wedding. She said you wanted her to be independent. We thought you preferred to stay in the background." I shook my head, still unable to form words. "That's not acceptable," Patricia said firmly. "You should have been honored tonight. You should have been thanked. I'm appalled." She squeezed my hand. "Please stay. Let me make this right." But I couldn't stay. I'd been humiliated in front of 200 people, and even though Robert had stood up for me, I couldn't bear another moment in that room. I looked at Maggie. "I need to leave." "I'll take you," she said immediately. Robert stood up. "Helen, I'm sorry if I made things worse. I just couldn't sit there and let you be disrespected like that." "You didn't make anything worse," I managed to say. "Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for remembering." Maggie and I walked out of that ballroom together. Behind us, I could hear the murmur of shocked conversations. The wedding had fallen apart. The perfect image Jessica had worked so hard to create was shattered. And I felt nothing but devastating sadness. If this story breaks your heart like it does mine, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments if you've ever felt betrayed by family. Maggie drove me back to my hotel. I packed my suitcase, checked out, and we drove through the night back to Ohio. I didn't sleep. I just stared out the window, replaying every moment of the evening, every word of Jessica's speech, every lie she'd told. For 3 days, I heard nothing from Jessica. No phone call, no text, no apology. I wondered if I'd ever hear from her again. Part of me hoped I wouldn't. Another part of me ached for my daughter, even after what she'd done. On the 4th day, Thomas called me, not Jessica. "Thomas. Helen, it's Thomas. May I come see you? I'm in Ohio on business. I'd like to talk to you in person." I almost said no. But something in his voice made me agree. He came to my apartment that evening, looking exhausted and troubled. We sat in my small living room, and Thomas didn't waste time. "I need you to know I had no idea," he said. "Jessica told me her parents were working-class people who'd done their best, but couldn't help much. She said you were proud and wanted her to make her own way. She made it sound like you preferred distance. I didn't know you'd paid for the wedding. She told me my parents had paid for most of it and she'd saved for the rest." I nodded, unsurprised. When Robert gave that speech, I was stunned. After you left, I confronted Jessica. She broke down and admitted everything. She said she was ashamed of her background. She thought if my family and my colleagues knew the truth, they'd look down on her. She thought she needed to seem independent and sophisticated to fit into my world. "Where is she now?" I asked quietly. "At our apartment in New York. She's devastated. She knows what she did was unforgivable." Thomas looked at me with genuine regret. "Helen, I love your daughter, but I'm struggling to reconcile the woman I thought I married with the person who could treat her mother this way. I told her she needs to make this right. I told her if she can't, I don't know if I can stay married to her." That shocked me. "Thomas, don't throw away your marriage over this." "This isn't just about you," Thomas said. "Though what she did to you is terrible enough. This is about who Jessica really is. She lied to me about fundamental things. She constructed a completely false narrative about her life. She was ashamed of the people who loved her most. I don't know if I can trust her now." I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. My daughter's lies had cost her everything. "I need to ask you something," Thomas said. "The $70,000 you gave Jessica for the wedding. She still has about $15,000 left. She wants to give it back to you. Will you take it?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse out of pride. But I was practical. $15,000 would make a significant difference in my retirement. "Yes," I said. "I'll take it." Thomas nodded. "I'll make sure you get it. And Helen, I'm going to do something else. Jessica isn't going to like it, but it's the right thing. I'm going to make a donation to Lincoln Elementary School in your name. $50,000 for their literacy program. Teachers like you changed Robert's life. Maybe that donation can help other teachers change more kids' lives." I started crying again. "Thank you, Thomas." He hugged me before he left. "I'm sorry Jessica made you feel like you weren't enough. You are extraordinary." 2 weeks later, Jessica finally called me. I saw her name on my phone and almost didn't answer. But I did. "Mom?" Her voice was small, broken. "I'm here." "Mom, I'm so sorry." She was crying. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to explain what I did. I was so worried about fitting in, about being good enough for Thomas's world. I thought if people knew the truth, they'd think less of me. I thought I had to be someone else. And I hurt you. I humiliated you. I'm so ashamed." I listened, saying nothing. "Robert Kensington called me," Jessica continued. "He told me if I didn't make this right, he'd make sure everyone in Thomas's firm knew what kind of person I really am. He said he'd ruin my reputation. Mom, I'm so scared. Thomas is barely speaking to me. His parents are disgusted with me. Everyone at the wedding is talking about what happened. My friends won't return my calls. I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything," I said quietly. "You still have your job, your apartment, your health, your youth. You've lost people's respect, but that's not everything." "Have I lost you?" Jessica whispered. I took a deep breath. "I don't know, Jessica. What you did hurt me more than anything ever has. You erased me. You erased your father. You were ashamed of us, of the people who loved you unconditionally and gave you everything we had." I know. Mom, please forgive me." "I need time," I said. "I need to process this. I need to figure out if I can trust you again. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll make a public apology. I'll tell everyone the truth. Just please don't give up on me." I closed my eyes. She was still my daughter. Despite everything, I still loved her. But I couldn't just forget what she'd done. "Jessica, you need to figure out who you want to be, not who you think other people want you to be, who you actually are. And then you need to decide if you can live with that person." We talked for another hour. She cried. I cried. We didn't fix everything. But it was a start. Over the next 6 months, things slowly changed. Jessica did go to therapy. She called me every week, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to apologize again. She sent me cards with handwritten notes about memories from her childhood, thanking me for specific things I'd done for her. She convinced Thomas to come to Ohio for Thanksgiving. The 4 of us, Thomas, Jessica, Maggie, and I, had dinner in my small apartment. Jessica helped me cook. She asked about Dad's favorite dishes and insisted we make them. During dinner, she stood up and gave a toast. "I want to thank my mom for this meal, for this home, for everything she's given me. I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate it. I'm sorry I was ashamed of the best parts of my life. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for how badly I hurt the person who loves me most. It wasn't enough to erase what had happened, but it was something. Thomas and Jessica worked on their marriage. She was completely honest with him about everything: her insecurities, her fears, her mistakes. Slowly, he began to trust her again. They're still together, though I know their relationship will always carry the scars of those lies. Robert Kensington became a part of my life again. He called me once a month, just to chat. He invited me to New York for a gala at Lincoln Elementary, where his donation was announced. I went, and I was honored on stage as a distinguished alumna of the school. Former students I didn't even remember came up to me with stories about how I'd helped them. I cried through the whole evening. Jessica came to that gala too. She sat in the audience and watched as person after person praised me. Afterward, she hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm so proud to be your daughter. I'm sorry it took a public humiliation for me to remember that." The money Jessica returned to me, combined with careful budgeting, made my retirement more comfortable. I could afford small luxuries, a better apartment, trips to visit Maggie's grandchildren, donations to causes I cared about. But the biggest change was in how I saw myself. For so long, I'd measured my worth by how much I could give to Jessica. When she rejected me, I felt worthless. Robert's speech that night reminded me that I'd made a difference in lives beyond just my daughter's. I'd been a good teacher. I'd helped children who needed it. I'd lived a life of service and kindness. That had value, even if Jessica couldn't see it at the time. Patricia Montgomery, Thomas's mother, reached out to me several times after the wedding. She invited me to lunch when I came to visit Jessica in New York. She told me she was embarrassed, that she'd believed Jessica's lies without questioning them. "I should have insisted on getting to know you better," she said. "I should have seen that something wasn't right." We became friendly, not close, but friendly. She treated me with respect and kindness, and that meant more than I can express. The hardest part was forgiving Jessica. Not just saying I forgave her, but truly letting go of the hurt. It took time. It took watching her consistently show up, consistently make an effort, consistently acknowledge what she'd done. It took seeing her change. A year after the wedding, Jessica and Thomas came to Ohio for a long weekend. We went through old photo albums together. Jessica cried when she saw pictures of Richard teaching her to ride a bike. "I miss Dad so much," she said. "I wish I'd told him how grateful I was." "He knew," I assured her. "He always knew." We visited Richard's grave together. Jessica brought flowers. She knelt down and talked to him, apologizing for the person she'd become, promising to do better. I stood there watching my daughter grieve, the father she'd erased from her wedding story, and I felt my heart begin to heal just a little. Looking back now, I understand that Jessica's behavior wasn't really about me. It was about her own insecurities and fears. She was so desperate to be accepted by a world she thought was better than the one she came from that she betrayed the people who'd actually loved her. It wasn't right. It wasn't acceptable. But it was human. I also understand that I'd enabled some of her behavior. I'd always put her needs before my own. I'd sacrificed without ever asking her to appreciate those sacrifices. I'd taught her that my love was unconditional and free, which meant she never had to earn it or value it. I don't regret loving her, but I wish I'd taught her to love me back with more respect. The wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day of my daughter's life became the day she lost everything she thought mattered. But it also became the day she started to find her way back to what actually did matter: family, honesty, gratitude, humility. I've been asked by friends if I regret giving Jessica the money for the wedding. Honestly, I don't. Not anymore. Because what happened at that wedding, as painful as it was, forced truths into the open that never would have been addressed otherwise. If Robert hadn't spoken up, Jessica would have continued living her lie. I would have continued enabling her by staying silent about my hurt. Thomas would have married someone he didn't really know. The whole foundation of their life would have been built on deception. Sometimes the most loving thing that can happen is the truth being exposed, even when it's ugly and painful, even when it destroys the illusion of perfection. Because you can't build a real life on lies. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe for more stories of strength and redemption. Have you ever experienced family betrayal or felt invisible in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2 years have passed since that wedding. Jessica is pregnant now with my first grandchild. When she called to tell me, she was crying happy tears. Mom, I promise this baby will know who you are. This baby will know what you did for our family. I'm going to make sure of it. I believe her. Not because what happened at the wedding is forgotten or fully forgiven, but because I've seen her change. I've seen her become more honest, more humble, more grateful. She still struggles with insecurity sometimes. She's still in therapy working through her issues, but she's trying, and that's what matters. Thomas and Jessica invited me to move to New York to be closer to them when the baby comes. I said no. I like my life in Ohio. I like my little apartment. I like being near Maggie and my other friends. I like being independent. But I'll visit often, and they'll come here too. We'll build a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect, not just on my endless giving. I think about Richard often, especially now as I'm about to become a grandmother. I wish he was here to see this. I wish he was here to meet his grandchild. I think he'd be proud of how I handled everything. He'd be proud that I finally stood up for myself, even though it happened in the most public and painful way possible. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Your worth is not measured by how much you can give or sacrifice for others. Your worth is inherent. You deserve to be valued, appreciated, and respected. And if the people in your life can't see that, it's not your job to convince them by giving more and more of yourself until there's nothing left. I spent years measuring my success as a mother by how happy Jessica was, how much I could provide for her. I thought if I just gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, I'd be a good mother. But I forgot to teach her the most important lesson, that love is a two-way street. That relationships require mutual respect. That being a good child means honoring your parents, not erasing them. I'm still learning to put myself first sometimes. It doesn't come naturally after a lifetime of putting Jessica first. But I'm learning. I'm taking classes at the senior center. I'm volunteering at the library. I'm living a life that's mine, not just lived in service to others. And you know what? I'm happy. Not despite what happened at the wedding, but in some ways, because of it. That night forced me to see that I'd been accepting crumbs of appreciation while giving everything I had. It forced Jessica to confront who she'd become. It forced both of us to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of her taking and me giving endlessly. When that grandchild is born, I'll hold that baby and tell them about their grandfather, Richard. I'll tell them about the sacrifices he made, the love he gave. I'll make sure that baby knows where they come from, and I'll make sure Jessica never forgets again. Robert Kensington sent me a note recently. It said, "Helen, I've watched you handle this situation with grace and dignity. You taught me as a child that kindness is strength. You're proving that again now. Thank you for being the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it. I keep that note on my refrigerator. On the days when I feel the old hurt creeping back, when I remember standing in that corner of the ballroom listening to my daughter erase me from her life, I read Robert's words. And I remember that my life has had meaning beyond just being Jessica's mother. I've touched lives. I've made differences. I've mattered. And that's enough. That has to be enough. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own dignity? Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most? Have you ever discovered that someone you loved was ashamed of you? I hope not. But if you have, I hope you know you're not alone. And I hope you find the strength to demand the respect you deserve. The stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. We believe in honoring our elders and treating all family members with love and respect. These stories are meant to inspire reflection on family relationships and the importance of compassion. Any resemblance to real people, events, or families is purely coincidental and unintentional. These narratives carry no specific cultural, political, or religious implications.